Hello, good evening and welcome to another exciting time where we talk about businesses all around the world, the practicality of businesses and the foundations of it, talking issues and big key issues in the world of business. It's Business 101 and my name is Blyden Ukem. Today we'll look at the impact of subsidy removal and the deregulation of the oil sector in Nigeria. We'll look at the very key questions that needs to be asked, the steady important analysis that has to do with the oil sector, while Nigeria is backward despite having oil and being the biggest producer of oil in Africa. We'll begin the conversation from the history of Nigeria's oil sector. In Nigeria, oil was reportedly first discovered in Bayelsa State in the Niger Delta in 1956. In 1936, the Royal Dutch Shell Group founded Shell Dasse, the first shell company in Nigeria. Olobiri oil field was discovered on Sunday 15 January 1956 by Shell Dasse. It was the first commercial oil discovery in Nigeria. This discovery ended 50 years of unsuccessful oil exploration in the country by various international oil companies and launched Nigeria into the limelight of the petro-states. The oil and gas sector plays a significant role in the economy, contributing about 65% of government revenue and over 85% of total exports. Nigeria also has a largely underdeveloped mining sector, which makes up less than 1% of a country's GDP. The yoke of Nigeria's colonial past of being a supplier of raw materials rather than a processor of commodities resulted in a country of a net exporter of crude petroleum and importer of products mired in perennial debates about fuel subsidy, a legacy of being oil dependent. It's been a conversation from a Nigerian point of view and quite difficult being dependent on oil. Nigeria's core problem is that it relies almost entirely on expensive imports to meet its gasoline need, despite being Africa's largest oil and gas producer. Nigeria has 4 state-owned refineries, but they have become dilapidated and idle due to mismanagement. Subsidies exist because the government fixes the price of gasoline for consumers below the international price and uses government resources to pay for the difference. They were first introduced in Nigeria in the 1970s as a response to the oil price shock in 1973. From October 1973 to January 1974, the embargo seized U.S. oil imports from participating Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, OAPEC nations, and began a series of production cuts that altered the world price of oil, and it affected Nigeria too. These cuts nearly quadrupled the price of oil from $2.90 a barrel before the embargo to $11.65 a barrel in January 1974. Fuel subsidy has been in place in Nigeria since the 1970s. It began with the government routinely selling petrol to Nigerians at below cost to minimize the impact of rising global oil prices on Nigerians, and it's still the same. Until recently, it was the same. Many economists argue that subsidies work against free trade and create market inefficiencies. Well, today, we will be looking at the impact of subsidy removal and the deregulation of the oil sector. Important questions will be asked. The turning point, what the future holds amid the removal of subsidy. How has subsidy affected the economy, the micro and macro economy of Nigeria, and the petroleum sector of Nigeria? We'll have these conversations and many more forms the crux of the talking matter in Business 101 today. My guests will be standing by. When we return from the break, we'll do the analysis, the intricacies, and a very important view about the impact of subsidy in the country. Don't go anywhere.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Welcome back. It is Business 101 and my name is Blyden Okem. In Business 101 today, we'll be looking at the impact of subsidy removal and the deregulation of the oil sector. What the impact will be moving forward? How has this talk about deregulation affected the business and the economy in Nigeria? Also talk about subsidy. Subsidy has been around Nigeria and the oil sector since 1974. It's been lingering around. And now recently the president said, no more subsidy. It's not part of the budget. What gets to happen moving forward and how it gets to affect the economy of Nigeria? Now, Mr. Japheth Jeff gets to join the show now. Mr. Japheth Jeff is a founder and CEO of Green Finance Capital in London. And he gives an outlook as an economist and a chartered accountant regarding subsidy removal and deregulation of the sector, the oil sector in Nigeria. Mr. Japheth Jeff, good to join the show now.
Thank you very much, Blackton, for having me.
All right. How is London?
Yeah, London is pretty very well. The season, we are in summer right now, and in summer the weather is pretty similar to what is obtainable in most cities in Nigeria.
Well, many get to talk about the summer being better than winter anyway, because it's not pretty cold and the relief of coming out of winter.
Yes, so basically the summer. So summer, you could see that the time zone also aligned. So it's pretty 6 o'clock here now in London, same as it is in Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while the conversation has always been what's happening in and around the scene and all over the world, in Nigeria it's been a difficult time, especially recently when the price of fuel is on the hike. It's going higher and higher and higher. And recently the President Bola Tinubu, said that subsidy has been removed. And the implication of that had been this: higher prices. Many Nigerians thought probably the price of fuel might come down, especially at the advent of the launch of Dangote refinery. But after the launch, the hope was that by July, there will be fuels in circulation and Nigerians will benefit from it and prices might come down. But it's not been the same. The struggle continues. And one of the talking points today would be that of subsidy. Let's begin this way for many who are listening. Not many people get to understand what subsidy is all about. So let's begin the conversation from there. From a layman perspective, what do we call subsidy, especially in the oil sector?
All right, thank you very much. Subsidy is simply a support given by the government to ensure that the price of fuel is affordable to all Nigerians. So this support could be in form of keeping the pump price of fuel and petroleum products low. It could also be in form of transferring some cash to suppliers and importers of petroleum products who import the finished products into Nigeria to enable them cover their cost of doing the business, the cost of importation, as well as make a reasonable profit after covering the cost. So this is what is called support. So all of this support and effort by the federal government of Nigeria were fuel and other related petroleum products affordable to the common man, to common Nigerians. So that is what subsidies, fuel subsidies means.
Interest or support they give in terms of the prices to make the price not to be at a standard price in the global market so that citizens can buy it. But for many, conversation would be this. When we talk about subsidy over the time, it started in 1974 during that price hike. We talked about that earlier. But since then, there have been large of subsidies one way or the other in the prices of these commodities, the energy market in Nigeria. One conversation would be this, how these had worked for Nigeria based on macroeconomics and microeconomics over the years. Prices of petroleum products, in particular PMS, petrol in particular, has been managed by the government so that citizens could buy at a lesser price. And for many, it did work out because the moment subsidy was removed, it's quite difficult for people in Nigeria, the citizens, Nigerians in particular. It's quite difficult for them because the prices are going up. It's affecting the cost of commodity. So let's look at it now. Let's look at the importance of subsidy so far, and now that it has been removed. Let's look at the gains compared to the losses. Why did the government have to remove subsidy moving forward?
All right. The government has come to reality because subsidy regimes don't come cheap. They are pretty expensive. They come with a huge cost to a country, to Nigeria. Let's be specific, to Nigeria. Because of the huge cost they come with, the Nigerian government have been struggling recently to be able to fund the subsidy scheme. For example, in 2022, based on data from the NNPC, that's the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Nigeria spent a whopping sum of 4.39 trillion naira on subsidy. That's about $9.78 billion. dollars. All right. So if you put that side by side and compare it against the Nigerian budget, that is almost about 50% of Nigerian national budget for 2022. So you can see that running a subsidy regime is very, very expensive. And at this point, the Nigerian government can no longer afford to run the scheme. If you look at it, a subsidy regime that takes almost 40 to 50% of your budget, it gives you no room to develop because you, after paying the subsidies, you basically have no money to build roads. You have no money to invest in education. You have no money to build new hospitals. You have no money to develop the country any longer. So it is crystal clear that Nigeria can no longer afford to finance or foot the bills of subsidizing fuels to her citizens. That's the reality.
All right, Mr. Japheth Jeff, the proponents that support subsidy will come from the angle of macroeconomics, which you've talked about, how it affects the country as a whole from a negative point of view. And if money is saved, it could benefit the citizens, build roads, build hospitals, develop the economy. But let's look at the other angle of that economy, the macro and then the micro. Number one, from a micro point of view, would be that of the citizens. Now, things are very expensive. It's biting on the citizens. Production cost increases because fuel is high. When energy cost is high, the cost of producing gets high. Manufacturers can manufacture any longer. Commodities are very expensive, transportation expensive. And guess what that leads to? It leads to inflation. Currently, Nigeria's inflation is on the high, 22.79%. A sixth consecutive time is going higher. And that's difficult because the implication of it from economic point of view would be this, that as inflation goes higher, it also gets to affect not just the commodity, but Naira. It's weaker. And a ripple effect. Exportation is affected, importation is affected, total conspicuous hardship in the economy of the country. So many people now say, how do we get to balance this? Because now you're saying the government is saving money, and most citizens don't get to trust the government because most of the government had been corrupt. But we don't want to talk about the corrupt indices. Let's look at the economic matters now. How do we balance it? Now you're saving a chunk of this money that could have helped the people, because if this money was into the economy, it would have helped the people.
All right. Thank you very much. You have raised germane points. All right. And these points you have raised are very, very important. There are no gains without pains. All right. There is no crown without the cross.
Okay.
So Nigerians and Nigeria is at the crossroad at the moment. And the crossroad is to make a decision to let subsidy go and hold the government accountable. I mean, really, really hold the government accountable like they have never done before. Because at least they have got a point, they have got something to hold on to, which is the savings from desubsidization scheme. All right, desubsidization means removing subsidies. You desubsidize a particular sector of the economy or subsector. So Nigerians need to step up to hold their leaders to account for the proceeds of the savings from this scheme. It's very, very critical. And I believe that the pains should be able to drive and pull Nigerians together, regardless of their political differences, to focus on the economy and hold the president to account squarely on the basis of economy, because economy is very important to the survival of the citizens.
Okay.
If the economy is prosperous and the economy is doing very well, um, the people will be happy. Everybody's life will be better, and the people will have opportunity to live and achieve their dreams. If the economy is not doing very well, there's this kind of a state of despair and hopelessness. Okay, so Nigerians have to rise to the occasion right now.
Okay.
That's point number one. Point number two, let me make a point of correction here. And there are several products, petroleum products that are consumed in Nigeria. We have AGO, that's what diesel. We have aviation fuel. We have kerosene. We have LPG, that's the cooking gas.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have fuel, which is the PMS. That's the premium motor spirit, the
Yeah.
one that we call fuel, used inside our cars, our generators, and everything in Nigeria. Now, I want to state that it is only PMS or fuel that was subsidized. AGO was never subsidized. The subsidy from AGO was removed ever since.
Mm.
Nigerians survived. The subsidies from kerosene was removed ever since. Nigerians survived and the economy recalibrated and balanced. No subsidies on LPG, yet Nigerians are making use of LPGs in their kitchens and for domestic purposes. So, why I'm bringing this point is to set the record clear that it's only PMS that has been desubsidized. The subsidy has been removed only on PMS. And because of this, production in factories runs on diesel. Most Nigerian companies run diesel engine generators. So, if companies are increasing prices and referencing the removal of fuel subsidies, then it's a different ball game that the government has
Products
to
are
step
also
in
transported.
and try to regulate some of those things.
Mr. Jeff.
Because there is no subsidy on AGO, which drives production in factory.
Okay.
So these are the points of correction I want to clearly articulate here.
Well, that's why you're on the show, to give standing to this conversation and direction to this conversation, because you are a stakeholder in this. But let's look at the transportation aspect of it. And when you're talking about petrol or premium motor spirit PMS, it gets to affect virtually everything, from the poor to the rich. Movement, transportation is key. In the distribution line and supply chain, transportation is very key in this. But you've made your point in support of the removal of subsidy. Let's look at this way. Every policy from government, from many people's angle or many economists, would have a two-face to it, positivity and negativity. But sometimes the positive angle gets to surpass the negative angle of it. So let's look at the negativity that might come with the subsidy removal, because it can be all smooth. Yes, one part is the difficulties that citizens are facing. What if all these indices we're looking at does not work out at the end of it?
If I may understand clearly, economic policy have cost benefits, as you have rightly said. Now, the benefits in this program or this current policy are massive. If the government can harness those benefits properly, they are really, really
We
massive.
understand that the benefits are
They are
massive.
huge.
What I'm talking
The
about,
cost is also massive.
Exactly.
All right,
The cost, yes.
is massive as well. All
I
right.
want to hear about the costs.
But We should focus on the cost. Is that what you're...
Yes, let's speak on the cost a bit. We've talked about the benefit. You've had a lot of time to talk about the benefits that comes with a policy. Let's see, because sometimes what you're not aware of can be that difficult for you to handle. Because we're getting to a point where Nigerians have to find a way to handle their daily lives. I mean, all the difficulties and the costs. So if I have a good understanding of what it will cost me to sacrifice this much for the future, let's have the knowledge.
Mhm. All right. So basically, as I earlier mentioned, Nigerians need to learn to turn a new leaf in holding leaders to account
Okay.
on the basis of economic management. All right. What Nigerians need is a boost in their incomes.
Yeah.
If Nigerians' incomes get boosted, they can afford to live their lives normally and happily, regardless of the removal of subsidies on PMS or fuels. Now, this boost in income cannot happen if the government fails to manage the economy properly. Now, proper economic management starts with appointment of ministers and key economic management appointees to manage the sensitive economic agencies of the government. For instance, the Minister of Finance is a position that you should never play politics with. If you love your people, you love your country, you want to reduce hardship, you must not appoint a weaker finance minister.
Okay.
The position of the central bank, if you love your country, I'm saying this emphatically. If you love your country and you really love your people and you do not want them to suffer and you do not want them to turn to a state of despondency and despair, you must appoint a competent person as the central bank governor. You must not follow tribalism and other mundane criteria
All right.
other than competency in appointing the central bank governor. So these key agencies, they are responsible for the economic management. The central bank is in charge of monetary policy, is what deals with inflation. They manage inflation.
All right.
All right. The finance minister is in charge of fiscal policy. And fiscal policy has to do with budgeting, infrastructure, funding, public debt. These are key macroeconomic aggregates that touches the heart of our daily living
All right.
as citizens of Nigeria. So the moment these are played with and mixed with politics, that's the end of it for the people.
All right. Let's talk
It will be a
about.
struggle upon struggle.
Okay, Jeff. Let's talk about other areas. Now that you've talked about infrastructure, budgeting, debt setup in the country, and debt management, and all of that. Over the years, we've realized it's no news that Nigeria is the #1 oil producer in Africa. As of June, in the last how many months, 6 months thereabout, there was a slump in oil production in Nigeria. Based on vandalism and all that issues, pipeline vandalism and the rest, safety of those pipelines. But it's not the conversation for today. We've seen improvements in terms of the production quota. It has actually gone up to 1.24 million barrels per day in June. But the conversation would be now, over the years, Despite the fact that we've seen other countries blossom, who are all producing countries, you can talk about countries in the Middle East. Nigeria, an oil producing country, seem to be poor, poorer despite having oil. I would want to ask this because you've talked about areas of leadership and areas of budgeting and financing and the rest. What do you think has been the biggest bend for Nigeria in terms of its progression and success? And Nigeria has rich resources, natural resources and rich human resources. Despite all these resources, the poverty level in the country is so high. It feels like I'm swallowing your mood, the way you're shaking your head.
Yeah, this is it's pathetic and it's touching. All right, you could see me shaking my head in sympathy and with all sense of remorse, as if I perpetrated the crime or the vicious cycle of poverty that have entangled many Nigerians' lives, millions, hundreds of millions of lives in Nigeria. Yeah, the problem is corruption, political corruption. That's the problem.
Okay.
Because in the last 10 years, according to Native, Nigeria initiative on Nigerian initiative on extractive resources and transparency initiative. They say that Nigeria has realized over $400 billion from 2010 to 2020 from crude oil. $400 billion. That's how much Nigeria has realized. We're now going to talk about years prior to 2010, all right? But just from 2010 to 2020, Nigeria saw raw cash of $400 billion. However, development has failed to match this quantum of revenue generated by the country. Human development index are grossly abysmal. Nigerians, the level of unemployment in one of the highest in the world. One is the top 5 highest levels of unemployment at about 39%. These are all unacceptable. They are not supposed to be. But corruption, Nigerian politicians have refused to develop the country, have refused to empower their people, have refused to build their country. That's the sad story. So whenever I'm talking about it, I'm really pained. And I look hopeless, or helpless rather, helpless because I'm not a politician. I have never been the finance minister, neither have I been the CBN governor. I'm only a private sector practitioner who contribute to build the economy from the private sector perspective and who diligently contributed. The responsibility
good to know you're doing
of
your
developing
contribution.
the economy, utilizing the resources to develop the people, and it boils down to how we recruit leaders. The people have to change their recruitment process of leadership.
All right.
The people have to change the criteria they use to recruit the leaders. Because when you recruit the leaders, you are simply recruiting the politicians to go and manage the resources, the commonwealth for you, in your own interest.
All right.
So you must have a look at the recruitment criteria. That's all I have to say at this point. Okay. Because no economic theory is going to save Nigerians and save the lives of Nigerians if we keep on recruiting
The wrong managers,
incompetence, and
wrong
corrupt
leaders, and wrong
leadership.
managers.
That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's look at some other sector, the oil sector itself, because many would say, while we're looking at the boom in the oil sector, lots of money being made in that area. There are basic challenges affecting the Nigerian oil sector, the oil and gas sector in particular. What do you think are these challenges? And probably because it is often said that you have to know the problems in order to be able to solve them. One of it could be, from the Niger Delta point of view, oil spillage has been a thing over the time, especially in the Niger Delta. Maybe there are other things you can tell us about.
All right. Every business faces challenges, right? In life, there are always challenges. And that's the reason why there are always opportunities to grow. So, the Nigerian oil and gas industry has been bedeviled um, by several challenges. Some of the challenges are poor legal framework. There was no proper legal framework that was intentionally designed to make doing business and investing in the oil and gas industry in Nigeria attractive prior to 2021. However, the Nigerian government under the President Buhari administration made some amazing progress in that direction by working on a new legal framework called the PIA, that's the Petroleum Industry Act
Yeah.
2021.
What is it
That
about?
legal framework has simplified the process of doing business in the oil and gas industry,
In what way?
has removed some of the hindrances that were hindering further investment into that sector, the oil and gas sector. So kudos to the National Assembly, the past National Assembly, and President Buhari in that regard. At least they have taken a step forward in terms of creating a legal framework that many players in the industry have affirmed that is attractive
Okay.
and could bring more investment into the sector. Another issue is insecurity and oil theft. We all know it is on record that Nigeria loses over 400 to 500 barrels of crude oil daily to oil theft, crude oil theft. So, and if you look at critically, that quantum of crude cannot be stolen by a petty thief. There must be a synergy between security agencies and the thief to be able to steal and export over 400 to 500 barrels of crude daily. All right, so that's a major constraint that is also depriving Nigeria and Nigerians from enjoying the benefits of crude. All right, another one is community issues and conflict from host communities. It's unfortunate that despite the huge budgetary allocations given to some agencies that were created to manage and develop host communities, such as the is it NCCDO? That's the Niger Delta Development Commission.
NDDC.
All of these billions have been looted. And I stand to be corrected. But if you don't loot the billions allocated to them from national budget, where is development? The only way to prove me wrong that they have not looted the budgetary allocation to the Niger Delta Development Commission is to show me development. There's literally no development in Niger Delta
All right.
as we speak.
All right.
All right. So these are some of the challenges that are bedeviling the oil and gas sector currently. And where there's poverty in host communities, you can't live in glass houses and expect the host community not to throw stones or not to attack.
All
Because
right.
you can't come and build glass houses in their villages while you allow them to be drinking polluted streams, water from polluted streams.
Well, we'll try not to be
It's
political then.
unfortunate.
Okay. We'll try not to be
So
political.
these are the issues, and these issues have to be addressed.
All right. Thank you. We'll try not to be political in all of this. We're looking at the economic matters, and it's Business 101, talking about the impact of subsidy removal. And next would be talking around the context of deregulation in the oil sector. We'll go on a short break. When we return, we'll look at the positions of NMPC. Since NMPC became a private entity from being a government-owned, what has been the changes? What has been the limitation? And what are we expecting to happen next amid independent marketers requiring to import fuel alongside NMPC? Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is Business 101 and my name is Blyden Okem. We've been talking on the impacts of subsidy removal in Nigeria, also looking at the history, what the impact of subsidy itself had been in the country, the disadvantages and the advantages, and moving forward that subsidy has been removed in the oil sector, especially not just the oil sector but regarding the PMS, premium motor spirit, popularly known as petrol. What is the impact? Who are the regulating bodies in charge of fixing prices or controlling prices? Now we'll be looking at deregulation in the oil sector. In 2003, the deregulation of the oil sector was up. Conversations everywhere. And the idea of deregulation was to shift from a government-controlled downstream sector to a more private-controlled downstream sector, where market forces tend to control the market. In other words, investors could also import petrol, import diesel, import kerosene where necessary, since Nigeria is still importing derivatives of this crude, while Nigeria is exporting the raw crude oil. The conversation has been that of difficulties because last year, 2022, President Buhari led the launch or introduction of NMPC as a private entity. It became, before it was NNPC, and now it's NMPCL, adding limited to it as a private entity. Mr. Jafet Jeff, he's an analyst with us and he'll give us a clue on this one. Let's talk about the privatization of the sector in Nigeria. Since the change, NMPC, governments still seem to own a chunk of this business. Just recently, there have been complaints from independent marketers about the possibility of importing fuel. The conversation has been this, that NMPC has been the sole importer of fuel into the country. No wonder prices are high. That if independent marketers begin to import fuel, we could see market factors playing out at the end of it. What has been the changes so far? What are the possibilities of changing moving forward? Is it positive or negative from your standpoint?
I think it's a positive one because the NMPC also have been a vampire. The former NNPC, that's the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation.
Absolutely.
The best description I could describe NNPC then was a national vampire. Why I say the vampire was because the NNPC was grossly inefficient. It was operationally inefficient, financially inefficient, and was a big drain on the public finance. The NNPC had about 4 refineries or 3 refineries.
4 refineries.
The Port Harcourt, I think 4 or 3. Port Harcourt Refinery, Kaduna Refinery, and Warri Refinery. Is there any other one?
Go ahead.
So 3 refineries. Now these refineries were producing zero crude. I mean, they were not processing any barrel in a year. But these same refineries were incurring expenditures in billions. I mean billions, hundreds of billions. All right? Hundreds of billions. So why should you hold on to assets that are not creating value, but rather siphoning and depleting resources, national resources? That's one. Two, the NNPC was being managed by people who got no management efficiency or drive or direction. They were simply preoccupied with going into joint ventures, and when they go into joint ventures, what they were looking in those joint ventures or production sharing contracts wasn't really to generate enough revenue and make sure that they operate efficiently and profitably. Now, so trying to liquidate the NNPC and transform it into the NNPCL, that's the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited.
Yes.
It's a bit better idea because it will bring the sense of profitability and efficiency into the management. Although the current management was still the old managers. They
Yes.
simply imported the old managers, the GMD, former GMD, and brought him to be the GMD of the new NNPC Limited.
And the stakeholder is still the government. And the major stakeholder is still the government.
Question. However, it's an improvement. It's an improvement.
Okay.
It's an improvement.
Okay.
It's an improvement
All
because the only improvement is that it has signaled the era of efficiency and profitable operations.
So there is hope.
You come on, you can't run the way you were running before. You are no longer a charity.
All right.
You are a pure business venture and you must run profitably, regardless of some of this weakness I have pointed out.
Thank you, Japhet Jeff. Always a conversation to talk about, and subsequently we'll have further conversation regarding the oil sector in Nigeria. By the way, Nigeria has 4 refineries, 2 in Port Harcourt, 1 in Kaduna, and 1 in Warri. But sadly, these refineries are non-functional. It's a conversation, no wonder. When Dangote refinery was up, there were quite lots of excitement around the country. Signs of positivity to come. But here we draw the curtain on today's edition of Business 101. Thank you for being a part of it, Mr. Jeff, Mr. Japhet Jeff. Always a wonderful time when talking business. And to you, our guests from home, listening and watching, thank you for being a part of it. We do this next time on Tuesday. Thank you.